This is the Lunch and Learn session. It's sponsored by OTN, so a big thank you to them. That stands for Oracle Technology Network. If you don't know who they are, they run different things like the forums, user forums that we go to, and when we have questions about some things that we're seeing. So on the Oracle website, they run that. They also run the Oracle ACE program. How many people in here are familiar with the ACE program? Okay, good, a good number of you. ACE program is basically a recognition of individuals who are evangelists and promoters of Oracle and community contributors. So on this panel, we have a number, I think everyone up here is an ACE in one form or another. There's different types of ACEs. There's ACE Associate, there's a Oracle ACE, and then there's an ACE Director. Okay, and if you just go out to the site, you can find out some information about them. In this session, we have 2 ACEs and 3 ACE Directors. So as I joked before, we have a full house. So we're going to talk today about EPM platforms. This is an open forum. That means it's going to be really interesting if you all ask interesting questions, and it's going to be really boring if nobody says anything. Okay, so please don't be bashful. Let's get some information out. A couple of things logistically to keep in mind before we begin and we start introducing everybody. This session is being live streamed. That means that there are people in the cloud and other places in the world who are watching this. The reason I bring this up the most is not because I want you to behave, don't worry about that. It's because if you ask a question, you need to have the microphone. If you don't have the microphone, nobody's going to know what you're saying. It's hard enough to hear you in this room without a microphone, but the people on the web will definitely not hear you. So please raise your hand. I'm going to lose some weight this session by running around giving this microphone to everybody. That's fine. Just please give me a chance. Okay? And same for the panelists. Please make sure you have the microphone in your hand when you are responding. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and get started. I'll do just real briefly introduce myself. My name is Gary Crisci. I am a architect and EPM specialist at General Electric. I am part of the Oracle ACE program, and I am also an ODTUG director. So I've been doing this for a while and been attending a lot of K-Scope conferences. I'm very happy to see everybody here. And we have a really good panel today, so I'm going to let everybody introduce themselves, starting with Tim.
So I'm Tim Toe. I'm the founder and president of Applied OLAP, the visionary for the Dodeca spreadsheet management system, and I also lead the development teams in Huntsville, Alabama. I've been using Essbase for 20 years. Oddly enough, mostly on the user interface side. Never built a load rule or a calc script, so I won't be answering those questions. See what else should I say. Oh, I'm on the ODTUG board of directors as well. I'm also the treasurer of ODTUG, so give back to the community a lot that way as well. And I'll be hopefully answering some questions on APIs and that type of thing, perhaps even cloud. So.
Hello everyone, my name is Eric Helmer. So I'm an Oracle ACE director, really associated with the infrastructure side of the EPM platform. So I'll be here able to answer some questions around things like hardware, sizing, design, performance, upgrades, all of the IT side of the EPM solution.
Hello everyone, I'm Celvin Kattookaran, Oracle ACE director, principal architect at Huron Consulting, doing Essbase planning from past 11 years.
Hi, I'm Tony Scalese. I'm the integration director at Ranzel. I focus on data and master data integration, and since there's no representation or not much on the panel, I could probably field an HFM question here or there, maybe.
Yeah, we'll muddle our way through it.
Absolutely.
And guys, keep in mind, you have 2 mics, so. Okay.
We'll share.
Yes, you could share. Well, I saw it was passing its way down the line. So normally they tell me to kick this off with a question and get it started, and I can do that. But right off the bat, anybody show up today with something that they really wanted to know? There you go. See? Sorry, you don't get my softball.
I want to know more about your Exalytics conversion. You know, we're looking at that, and I heard briefly of it. How many servers did you replace when you implemented Exalytics, and what are you running on Exalytics? Are you just running Essbase and planning, or are you still using HFM? Is that still on a Windows platform? Or?
Sure. So this was actually a question for me directly, which was regarding GE's Exalytics deployment. I had a session prior to this on that. I'm not going to take up a ton of time on that right now, and I'm going to tell you why, besides these guys just sitting there staring going, why did we come if Gary's just going to talk? There's a session after this one at 2 p.m. with the GE architecture team. Okay, so you can see some of those guys are in the back of the room right now listening to this session, and we will be fielding all questions about our environment and what we're doing in our program and everything. And at a very high level, we're pretty much running everything with the exception of 1 or 2 products. So it's HFM, FDM, S-Space planning, all of it. And it is a large number of T5s. There's about 14, now 17 T5s that we're running across all of GE. So we can talk about that more at the 2 o'clock session, if you could come to that. Okay?
Gary, I can add on to that while you're walking to get a new question. We had a customer upgrade to Exalytics as well for 11124 HFM planning, FDMEE. They went from a 5-server farm down to a 3-server farm, including the relational server. And the one main watch-out I would give you is OHS needed to be on a Windows box in order to address some timeout issues that we were seeing and packets being dropped. Once we work through that, it's been a pretty stable platform.
And just remember with the Exalytics box, you are combining a lot of servers onto one, and it's a great use case for a large OBIE environment too. Don't forget about BI. So if there's BI all in there as well, really fast in-memory computing, large geospatial maps that you want live in memory, it's a great use case for that as well. But just remember, when you get a Exalytics, you're not going to get just one, right? So a couple $100,000 and you're going to need a development, you need a test, you might need a DR. If you want it highly available and load balance, you're going to need 2 just in production alone if it's mission critical. So just make sure that you realize it's more than just one. It's be quite an investment. And not everything runs on Exalytics too. There's going to be some Windows-only components such as EPMA and DRM and strategic finance and things that you'll have to string a Windows box off.
Right. The other thing that you can think about to that point is if you don't have the ability to invest in 5 or 8 or 15 Exalytics machines, you can partition them up using OVM. That's one of the things that the customer that we're working with has done for dev and DR purposes. They wanted to keep their test Exalytics box. They wanted to keep their test Exalytics box on par with their production so that they could test performance. But they have a 3rd machine that they're going to be partitioning up for DR because if it falls over to DR, they don't care about performance. They just want to make sure they can function. As the same thing with dev, performance isn't mission critical. So another option for you.
I'm not a hardware guy, but I will comment just about what one customer told me. They have thousands of S-Space cubes. They had something like 30 servers. I think they're going to 9 with Exalytics. So it's reducing the complexity they have in their environment.
The other thing I'll throw in with that, since everybody else jumped in on that, is you also have to understand that there are 2 different flavors of Exalytics. There's the Linux OEL version, which is an Intel-based machine, and you have a T5, which is a Spark-based chip that runs Solaris. Okay, we carve up 14 T5s into over 140 different servers, zones, logical zones. So the way these machines scale out varies depending on which ones you get and how you use them. So all points extremely valid. It's something that definitely requires a good amount of understanding if you're going to go down that road. It definitely takes time. Eric's point is extremely noted. You're not going to buy one. But you can reduce a number of existing commodity servers. We've reduced hundreds of servers in place of what we've built out on the Exa platform. So again, if you want to learn more about that, please come to the 2 o'clock session. We could dig into that real deep.
Yes, hi. This is a question on S-Base Hybrid. I know when it was announced a couple of years ago, it would work in hybrid with a restricted set of functions, a restricted set of properties. And if you were using one of the ones that wasn't supported, it would fall back into the old BSO aggregation engine. And I remember then it said, well, we're going to be providing support for these over the next couple years. I've lost track of now how many functions. If I took a typical S-Base database with a lot of dynamic functions, can I make use of hybrid now? What functions are missing? Blah, blah, blah.
I think Oracle, with the 11.12500, it was a limited set of functions, and then the next patch, which came into 11.124, it supports more function. I think it's somewhere close to 128 now. It supports dynamic time series. The first one didn't have that, so I had a customer who specifically went to hybrid just to get the dynamic time series out of box. They didn't want to do it on ASO, so it just went to hybrid just for that reason. More functions are supported. I think there is a vast list of functions that's supported with the latest patch. Only thing that you have to watch out for is if you are converting an existing one to a hybrid, you will have issues if you have a dynamic parent. If you run an allocation against a dynamic parent, it's going to switch into the BSO mode. That's still not going to work. Cross-stems work when it's all level 0. That's going to work. There's no issues there. Cur member is not supported. Cur member range is not supported. X range is not supported. There are a couple more. I cannot remember all of them, but those are some of the valid ones which you always use. Those are not supported. You'll have to rewrite your cal scripts if they are using cur member.
Okay. Let me come back to you in a second. As I said, this is a live stream, so you will have to share your question time with people online as well. So the question is from Teresa Kress: should we be moving away from using data sync features in EPMA and instead use FDMEE for data integration between Hyperion applications? I would say hand the microphone to Tony. And when do you think everyone will be forced to the cloud?
All right, so I'll take part one of the question, and then my esteemed colleagues here will all have their opinions about the cloud. Absolutely, I think you should be moving to FDMEE versus EPMA data sync. A few different reasons there. One, Oracle's stated that that's their strategic direction. EPMA data sync got a little bit of a reprieve in 11.124. It was supposed to be sunset. It's still there. I believe by 12 it will be gone. The other thing that I think makes FDME a better fit is that it's more powerful, it's more robust, the mapping is more intuitive, and you can apply security to it. So you can secure individual integrations, where with EPMA data sync, when you set up one and gave a user access to it, you gave a user access to all of them. Key difference there. Moving on to the latter part of the question around the cloud, do we think that everybody is going to be forced to go cloud? And Oracle was very specific about this during the symposiums on Sunday, and guys, please jump in as appropriate. Oracle will continue to have a two-pronged approach to the EPM platform. They will continue to support and enhance on-prem products. They will also continue to support and enhance cloud offerings. Cloud offerings will obviously take precedent, in my opinion. And I think I see people nodding along with that up here as well. So,
yeah, during Sunday they were very clear. There's a misconception out there that on-premise is going away, and it's not. It's not being replaced. You'll have the option to do one or the other. Remember, when you go to the cloud, you're renting the software, right? You don't own it. When you have it on-premise, you own it as an outright asset. So if you already own the software, some people are trying to figure out, does it make sense to then now go re-rent it or continue on an on-premise model or just outsource it to a hosting provider, right? So it's a different model depending on what type of cloud that you are considering, but don't think that you're forced to go if it doesn't make sense for you.
Well, technically, you don't own the software, you license it when it's on-prem. So it's like the legal guys would have you with that one. They look for every loophole, right? But my opinion on what the cloud's going to bring is that it's going to bring some customers out there that haven't been able to upgrade, bring them into the cloud. But in general, large customers, I don't see a lot of them actually moving to the cloud anytime soon. I've had several of my customers say that there's no way they'll ever go to the cloud. Their CIO said it's just not going to happen. So that bodes well for the on-prem because they're big customers. The other thing that I see with the cloud is this. I mean, the release cycles that they're going to do on the cloud. They're going to do releases, they do in planning, I think every month they move something into dev and then into prod, right? Yep. So there's these quick cycles of development. They do development, they put new features in, that type of thing, and it moves very quickly into production, much more quickly than you'd be able to ever do on-prem. And the second thing about that, though, is that it's Oracle actually responsible for maintaining it. So if there's a problem when they move something into the cloud, these new features, it isn't that you as an administrator is getting a call. Oracle people are getting calls. So Oracle has a lot of incentive to make them work right? So the whole idea then is as they do these cloud quick reps, every year they'll package those things up, and that's what will become the on-prem. So when you get the stuff on-prem, it's already been through many cycles of customers using it. So I think it provides probably less risk, theoretically, when it comes to on-prem for people to upgrade.
I'll just add on to the EPMA part. If you look at what Oracle said on the Sunday Symposium was nothing new is coming into EPMA. It's not dead, it's there. You can still use it. But if you think about it from a planning perspective, you're not going to get ASO plan type in an EPMA application. That's not going to be there because it's a new feature. Oracle is not going to add any new features into EPMA. So it's there. The people who are using that with HFM, it's going to be fine. That's what I've heard. I had bad experiences when doing EPMA with planning and space. So any new features is not going to make it into EPMA. So you have to think about that when you if you plan something new, I would say don't do it on EPMA. So that's my advice on the EPMA part.
I'll also weigh in on the cloud briefly and say that the operative word in that question was when. I think anyone who thinks 20 to 30 years from now you will have data centers in your corporations would most likely be incorrect. And so that CIO who says we will never go to the cloud, that's a function of the regulatory environment in the world today and people's perceptions of how things work. Data's secure in my four walls. You know what? AWS probably does a better job of it than you do. But regardless, I think eventually it does happen. Are we going to see that day when we are absolutely only have EPM cloud offerings? Maybe, maybe not. I think on-premise will continue to thrive for a while. But yes, someday it probably will go away. Hard to read the tea leaves, but that's just my opinion. So, next question.
Infrastructure question here. I'm at a client that is very reluctant to do patching. They do it roughly every 9 months to a year or so, and I'd like to see them do it more frequently. Their concern is that every time they do a set of patching to the EPM stack, there's about 2 to 3 weeks worth of regression testing that needs to be done in order to make sure that all 17 planning applications and 43 S-base cubes and FR and da-da-da-da-da. Does anybody have any tips on how to make that process smoother or simpler or how to get them over the hump? Because I find myself in a position of being 9 months or a year out. When I go to Oracle support with a question, they say, you got to patch.
Right, so first let me just make a comment that Hyperion/Oracle is not unique in the fact that you have to patch it, right? I mean, we're in that world with every enterprise software on the planet, all right? So there's nothing unique here. It's just part of maintaining a system, first of all. Second of all, I want to talk about there's 2 different kinds of patches. One is called a patch set exception, and one is called a patch set update. So a patch set exception is 11.1.2.4. some horribly long number. And that is a specific use case for a specific break fix for a specific issue that you would install maybe at the advice of Oracle because you stumbled upon a bug that was fixed. You would never just put PSEs on simply because they're out there. Then you have a patch set update. So a patch set update is a nice number like 11.1.2.4.100 or .200. Those are collections of patch set exceptions that have been certified in every environment. So the idea is that you would install those patch set updates in every case all the time. Okay, third one, they'll probably come out about every quarter or so, maybe 2 quarters, is a new patch set update. Patch set updates are fantastic because you have a lot of, yes, security fixes, but break fixes, performance fixes, but what we're seeing more and more and more now are new features. You're actually getting somewhat of an upgrade type of feel now to these patch set updates. In this latest version, the patch set that came out, we got a web version of the Finance Reporting Studio in a patch. Super important to apply those patches. You get some really cool whiz-bang things. So I would recommend at least a quarter to 2 quarters a patching exercise to march through the landscape, and yes, you're going to have to do your due diligence, to do your regression testing before you put it in the production. It's the world we live in.
And when you think about the latter part of the question of how do you streamline that regression testing, there's various tools out there that allow you to do that. So things like Mercury or HP Load Runner that allow you to run through a series of scripted things. Software like that, the customer should be investigating whether or not that makes sense for them. Is there enough value in them purchasing that type of license to get through that in an automated fashion?
My question's about an infrastructure issue going around the upgrade to 11.124. Oracle has a specified path saying that it has to be done in place, and then it can be moved to a new environment if you want to. But I am seeing a lot of people who are actually just putting a new platform 11.124 and migrating the applications even though Oracle says it is not supported. Pretty much everything. I'm talking about all the EPM. I think the only problem would be the FDM to FDME, but apart from that, I think planning, HFM, Essbase is an easier product. I know that is just not going to be a problem at all. So what is the approach that you are using, or what is the approach that, I'm an infrastructure consultant, so what is the approach that I should tell the customers, because I have been doing in place because that's what's supported by Oracle. How can I go past it, and what are the issues you faced by not following the in-place upgrade methodology?
Yeah, we always struggle with this one, right? But first, I think it all is going to depend on the existing version too, right? So if you're in 11.1.1 something, that kind of muddies the water up a little bit. But if you're in 11.1.2 something, a lot of times you can go direct and skip it, but if you want to be super safe, and a lot of times there's a lot of customization, annotations, things like that that are really tough to move. But if it's kind of plain Jane planning, plain Jane Essbase, I wouldn't be too scared to go direct. Try it in an environment. If for some reason something doesn't happen, and you go back to the stair step type of program. I hate to have FDM and FDMEE both installed at the same time. It's just really confusing on where directory paths and structures and things are. So if we're going to make that move, I like to make that an out of place anyway. So I think it's all kind of situational and the source version that you're starting with.
On the HFM front, one of the ways that our team has been handling that is spinning up a VM that's got 11.124 on it, running through the upgrade utility there, and then in the real production and real test and dev environments, actually using copy app or LCM to move the artifacts over post the upgrade so that you can support the newer versions of the operating system and the relationals.
So the rest of the applications, you've been just like using LCM to migrate from, let's just go with 2.2 because that's easier to compare right now. 2.2 to 2.4, are we just using, not the HFM part of it, just LCM from 2.2 to 2.4? I know it's probably not supported, right?
Right, yeah, so LCM, you have to go from the same version to the same version to be supported, right? So when you're upgrading, it's a little bit different how you would do it depending on the product. Now, if you're doing the 2.2 to 2.4 and you're going to move over a report, it'll probably work. But if it doesn't work, you can't call Oracle about it, right? So there's also upgrade things that happen in the configuration utility, right? So if you bring over some of the repository things prior to running the configuration tool, you have that option to upgrade while you're configuring. So you would actually move before you configure, and it can do it at that time as well. So it depends on the product.
There are some places where the LCM format is different from version to version, so you will see that issue if you do an LCM. So in place is always safe, but you have to still make sure that everything works. But we have done in place upgrades, you've done the other way around, but it still works. The only thing is, for Oracle to support it, they always say that you should go the supported route. So does it work other way around? Yes, it does work, but there are things that you have to make sure that everything works on the new version. That's it. LCM route, there is difference between LCM versions, like between the versions. There is differences in the LCM files itself.
I think with HFM, you also have to, especially as calling that one out specifically, HFM 11124 is a very different animal than it was prior. When they removed the Windows dependencies, they got rid of a lot of the different COM objects. You basically have just the two services now, the web service and the Java service. So that one's a little bit tricky. You gotta be careful with that one. Okay. Next question. Okay, oh, wait, okay.
This is more related to, I guess, EPMA shop. So currently we're running EPMA shop on-premise, HFM planning, everything. So if the plan is kind of going to the hybrid model, going to BPCS, so how can I leverage still the EPMA deployment part of the planning so that I can still have one EPMA in one place and able to still maintain metadata on the premise? I mean, I heard EPM automate, but I mean, is that really the answer for that? Or should I wait for the DRM on cloud come out later part of the, I guess, this year or 17? So just trying to understand the strategy.
Do you guys want to take that, or you want me to answer it?
I have had a client which did the same thing from EPMA to cloud. You can still manage your metadata in EPMA on-prem. The thing about that is extraction. You'll have to still depend on the outline loads CMD if you have to do it as an automated job. The EPMA, the outline load CMD file, it still works against EPMA application. You can still extract things out. You cannot put anything back in there, but you can still extract it out, then use EPM automate and then push it to cloud. That's a route you should look at. But yeah, again, if DRM cloud comes there, then you can move to DRM cloud. But if you're thinking about doing it, just think about extracting it using outline load and then push it back to ePVCS using EPM automate.
There's a question in the back. Who had their hand up before? Okay.
Hi. The question is more towards application versus platform. So the question is for the cache sizes. We are on Exalytics X series, and we recently upgraded from 2.3.508 to 2.4.005 something. We are seeing a lot of performance degradation in our calculations. And I was reading the Oracle documentation. It says that if you're on Exalytics, either set your cache sizes to 0 or 1024, or make it equivalent to your index file size or data file sizes. What should be our few approaches to consider what should we be going to the cache size? How do we set them to make the calculations better?
Celvin?
It's always a recommended size. I'm surprised to hear that you can set it to 0. The recommended size is always set your index file to this index file size. I'm not sure about Exalytics, whether it is different. Gary would be able to answer that, so it's the same. Okay.
The documentation says that if you are setting it to 0, Exalytics is good enough to use the operating system methodology to provide the cache it needs.
Well, really?
Yeah.
That depends on how you are using I/O or not. So I don't see.
Yeah, that's news to me.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to go dig that one up and look at that a little bit more closely. I mean, we've pretty much found that, Essbase on Exalytics is still Essbase. It can run faster, and we can multi-thread, and we can do more things in parallel, and we can not get as many bottlenecks on the I/O and things like that, but it's hard. It's still Essbase. I think you have to look, are you running these cubes on disk on the machine, or are you running them on a SAN? OCFS, which is, I don't recognize that acronym, sorry.
So this is clustered. So we pretty much have active passive clustering in Essbase, so we are using the clustered file system for Essbase.
Okay, so there's some things that you may want to look at there also, depending on what kind of file system it's using. There are issues with the way Essbase works on NFS, that there are certain config settings that will optimize it greatly. So there's some stuff to look at with that. I wasn't aware, I mean, to the point that I think Celvin was making is that, you know, your index file generally, your index cache should generally be the size of your index file, right? And with an Exalytics machine, you got plenty of RAM, so you can give yourself a nice, you know, buffer there for growth. That's probably not where your problem is.
I do remember there was one version where when you move from an older version to the newest, I don't know which code line it was, but there was one version where your file size was going to like exploit to a huge size when you move from your older version to the newer one.
Yes.
So there was a config setting that was exposed. I don't remember what it was, so maybe it's that. I don't know. I'm not so sure. It's just a thought.
So that's related to in-place block writing. Which I would have to check with Lieberman if that applies to your situation or not, because I don't recall. It works for us, but so in-place block writing, what it did was it said instead of where, I don't know if anybody saw my presentation earlier and you saw the performance bouncing all over the place, but then you saw it now on Exalytics, it's consistent because we get no fragmentation. Because instead of writing the block at the end of the index list, it writes the data back to the existing block. So, but in order to accommodate that, your page files increase by about 25% on your cubes when you upgrade to that version. But it's worth it. I mean, and we tend, you know, disk space is pretty cheap, so no one ever really complained about that. The benefit is worth it though. But that is, yeah, your page files increase greatly.
Okay. 2 years ago when we did it, 2 years ago we did an Exalytics comparison, and we found that you did not have to set the index file, the caches very high at all. It really just didn't make a lot of difference, and we had enormous cubes, both BSO and ASO.
Yeah, I haven't seen huge benefits with the cache settings on that. There's something else going on there. I would look at your file system. S-Space is very disk bound, especially if you're talking about BSO cubes, and you may have something going on there. This is actually a config setting, but I'll say it, and then, but you have to look into it and talk to Oracle about it. It's called numblocks to extend, and you may want to look at that because they changed the default behind the scenes of how that setting works, and that could impact read-write operations, particularly things like dense restructures and very intensive calcs. Lori, did you have an online question? Yes. Okay. The way I'm moving, you wouldn't know I had hip surgery 8 weeks ago. Okay, so the first question we have is, do we have any updates on Hyperion IR? No updates. It's still, you mean it's still deprecated and sunset? Microphones, please.
It still go to OBIEE, right?
Yeah, so the update being that it is a sunset product. I guess it's in some kind of lifetime support mode or something along those lines, but there isn't, I don't believe there's any active development. There have been no new releases, and you would want to go to OBIEE, as Eric said. Next question. What's your take on S-Space hybrid ag mode cubes? Right now, not a lot of features are completely supported. When do you think we'll have full support? So this is kind of a similar question we had earlier. This person probably joined online a little bit later. You want to just summarize, Celvin, what you said before?
I think what Oracle said was the full support is coming in 12C, where everything on BSO is supported on the hybrid mode. Right now, where we stand at is there are a lot more functions that got added with the newest patch release. Still, there are functions which are not supported. I said that this earlier. Car member being one, car member range. There are a set of functions that are defined there. The main thing that you have to keep in mind, and when you do hybrid, is if you do a calc, basically allocation, when you try to get a data from your parent members, it's going to switch back into the BSO. So that's probably the slowest cube that you will ever see, which is a dynamic sparse BSO cube. So just keep that in mind when you convert anything to hybrid. So that's only a hint. And then again, 12C is going to have the full support.
The other thing to keep in mind with hybrid is it's not an all or nothing. When you turn on hybrid, you don't have to make every single non-level 0 sparse member dynamic. You can have a mix. You can still run a consolidation, but maybe now you're not consolidating as much. Maybe you only consolidate from level 0 up to level 5, but then you make level 5 to level 7 dynamic. So there's ways to play with it and find that sweet spot. I think the most important point that was made earlier by Celvin was be careful turning hybrid on an existing application. We were told, and they have since rescinded this advice, just go ahead and turn it on for all your BSO cubes. Everything will be fine. It will just do what it does if it can, or otherwise it'll just be what it was before. That is not true. So we ran into situations where existing calc formulas failed because hybrid at that point in time had a bug. So just you're going to want to test that stuff thoroughly and not just turn it on and say everything's good to go.
And Gary, just a quick note, S-Space 12C is out. But it's just a standalone S-Space engine, so you're not throwing SmartView or FR or anything at it. So if you have that use case and you want to kind of kick the tires a little bit on that, you can get your hands on it. It's really for OBI.
Yeah, it's behind OBI. Yep.
Okay, I have a question on S-Base disaster recovery. So if I have a S-Base physical server, so what is the base method to do disaster recovery on S-Base server?
You want to know how to do disaster recovery for S-Base?
Yeah, disaster recovery on S-Base server, if it is physical.
If it is physical. There's all sorts of different ways that you can do disaster recovery. It's really going to depend on the service level that you need and your tolerance to downtime. So you can do anything from nightly snapshots and push. You can do things from full image backups and then recovery. You can do live data replication as well, but only at certain points in the file system, right? Because the system is very sensitive to the host name of the machine, right? So you always have to solve that host name problem. So you either have to somehow make that host name in your DR environment exactly the same, and then it's going to be very much easier to pick things up and then move it over to another side, or that host name is going to have to be different, and what you're doing is automating a migration from production, say, to a DR. Whole bunch of different ways. It depends if you're okay with 24 hours or if you're okay with 5 minutes, right? It's all depend, and the technology that you have available, such as replication technology. And don't forget, there's a back-end database that has to go to. There's shared services that has to go to. There's security that has to go to, any associated reports. So it's not just S-Base. There's a lot to consider, right?
This is about FDME. It's still new. Probably Tony can answer this question. I was in your session, and you actually mentioned probably not many people used the FDM to FDME utility successfully. I actually got it to work, and everything went through fine. But actually, I couldn't get it to replicate the LCM between two environments. How do you keep two environments live? Like just getting production into dev when they want to do some new mappings. I'm not able to bring the data in because the LCM for FDME does not move data. How do you manage two environments to be in sync?
So in terms of moving the data, there's really only one option for that, and that's a database replication. So picking up the repository from one and moving it into the other. Obviously, there's impacts to that in terms of all the system settings that are stored in the application. Those being moved across the environment, those would need to be looked at and updated after that database movement. In terms of LCM, we've had limited success with it. We have been in an active feedback loop with Oracle. It can work. We have had instances where when you register a custom application, the mapping tends not to migrate nicely, but everything else seems to. And we found that by piecemealing the LCM import process, you can sometimes overcome those issues that you're seeing on trying to import. So if you do have a problem moving via LCM, break that import down into individual components. Identify where your problem's occurring and then isolate and fix that problem.
I think most of the artifacts came over. It's only the data which is having a problem. I just spoke to the FDM product manager as well. He wasn't even aware that the data wasn't coming. So I don't know what is, because we cannot do the database replication anymore, as FDM doesn't have its own schema for applications because everything is bundled into one app, so the schema is used for both system and application. So migrating or like replicating the schema would be a lot more riskier, I would say, because all the system settings are in the same thing too. Have you come across any of the situation where you had to do, is there an import-export for data alone or something?
Well, let's be clear. The ability to migrate data has never been part of LCM. It was never part of FDM Classic either. So it's not as though there's functionality missing from the application that was previously there. I just want to level set on that. In terms of moving the data, I think the bigger question is why? Why are you attempting to move data between environments as it relates to the mapping process?
I believe they're using drill through from HFM. So for auditing reasons, they want to know the details that they need to go to. So if they are starting at a particular point, they want to refresh the production to dev, which was probably 8 months old or whatever. So this is just a customer request that I'm facing the issue with. That's why this question's coming up.
So it sounds like Gary's got some things to say, and then I'll...
Yeah, that's a horrible process.
Yeah, I completely agree.
And, you know, just the fact of the matter is, if you were really running it right back to the customer, right, why are you moving production data into a non-production environment? You can make the argument that that data should be anonymized anyway. So I think Tony's point is valid, and we've run into this as well. And we do battle with our customers because they come to us with these same requirements. And it's a tricky one because you're caught in a difficult spot if you're a consultant. But production data in dev, I think it calls into question the process that they're doing. And so it's going to be very hard, the sum there being, it's going to be hard to push Oracle to introduce features that they would consider not a best practice.
Right. I mean, as the application moves across, all the data is stored via the partition key and the role ID, period key, and category key. All that stuff can change across environments, even with the same names. So it's not a hard position as a consultant. Your job as a consultant is to advise your customers and advise them when they're making a poor decision or asking you to build something that really doesn't make a whole heck of a lot of sense. And I think this is an instance where that would apply. The ability, if they do want it, then refresh it at the database level, but really push back.
Or just load the files again, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
My question is on the infrastructure. We recently enabled SSL. We have one instance of OHS, and we don't have a load balancer. The OHS 11.117 that comes with EPM 11.124 does not support TLS 1.2. So there is another version of OHS 11.119 that supports TLS 1.2. So can this version 11.117 be patched with the 11.119 so that TLS 1.2 can be enabled?
You know, we've come across this because they want the TLS levels, and I think you can patch it up to that level to do that. But before you go and do that, and I just can't remember the exact version, I would make sure that it's in the supportability matrix, that it's specifically said, and if it's not, open a ticket with Oracle and have them at least give you an official response saying it's supported. I'm pretty sure it's going to work just fine for you, but I don't want to get you into a point of being out of compliance for supportability, right?
I did open an SR. They said it's not recommended, but they said they'll have a patch available, but they don't give any timelines on that. So
you'll never get timelines. So.
I'll come back to you next.
Thank you. Just one counterpoint to the FDM-EE feedback. We do have clients with integration or prod-like environments, which are highly locked down integration environments, runs just like prod, almost no one has access to it, and it's just essentially pre-prod. And so do you guys have clients with FDM-EE in that situation where you have a highly locked down pre-prod environment that's just for, you know, final pre-prod migrations, checks? Do you want to add on, George?
Well, yeah, again, you might have a prod-like environment for bug fixes, for final staging before implementation, and in these you do want to keep them in sync with your production environment. That's the whole point of the whole point of it. So, any recommendations?
If you have to have the data there, you've got one primary option in terms of bulk updating everything, and that's to move the relational or reprocess the data files, which would obviously be an onerous process across multiple locations, multiple integrations. If you have to keep it in sync and there's a valid reason, nothing's an absolute. There's always a reason to do something. But my point was more challenge the customer. Really, because we want it isn't always the best answer, and our job is to educate a customer as to the cost of that because we want it request.
And explore the requirement that it has to be exactly what's in prod in order to be able to regression test. I would challenge that as well, that you can test without the full data, that you don't need that full data set there in every single prod number. And if they disagree, then go buy DataGuard and set up another data center with the exact same configuration and replicate your data every second. And, you know, they can spend a couple $1 million so they can regression test every patch. I mean, everything can be done, but there's a cost to it. So you have to weigh, you know, the value of what it costs to do it versus how much I really need it. So.
Well, I guess my point is if you have a like-for-like pre-production to production, wouldn't you just load data into that in the exact same way that you load data in production at the same time? Why do it in one place and then try to sync it back? Just do the same thing in both places.
So when I was talking about FDME data, it's a little bit different than what he's talking about keeping the production and dev live, because FDME has the mappings and all the artifacts can be migrated over. The data is actual granular dollars, which has been already loaded into HFM. So even if you want to keep dev and prod in sync, your HFM data is the one which is needed. It's not the FDM data. It's more like an ETL. Tony, if you want to elaborate on what I was saying.
I think we've gotten down a rabbit hole here. I don't know if we're talking about FDMEE or an EPM target like HFM.
Yeah, I thought we were talking about the trial balance upload data in FDMEE. Once you start talking about the HFM data, because now it sounds like you're saying about keeping HFM data in sync.
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking about HFM data, that's a valid use case. That's why the copy app utility exists. But if you're talking about simply integrating the data, my challenge still holds, and I think everybody on this panel is kind of saying the same thing.
My question was migrating from FDM Classics to FDM EE, you know, with the Oracle platform. We ran into some case-sensitive issues with some of our mapping, like Absolutely. An FDM Classic. Yeah. You could load data; it could have any type of case, but an FDM EE, it doesn't exist with Oracle.
Yeah, that's been an enjoyable experience, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Ignore being in all lowercase doesn't work.
Right.
The reality is you just got to look through the maps. You've got to look through any of the functions that you have in your check rules, because those are case sensitive now because they're Jython.
Right.
So that's always been kind of a fun learning. Unfortunately, I mean, outside of writing some custom utility that kind of sweeps through, you just have to kind of do your testing. Gary,
Windows to Unix. So we got about 10 minutes left, so we'll keep this going for a few more minutes.
It's more on performance issue. I don't know if anyone has this issue, or just wanted to throw out to see if I can get some help. We moved from 11.121 600 to 11.124. We have an in-place upgrade for non-prods and an in-parallel build, a fresh install, and then switching over. When two planning instances, either horizontal or vertical, being up and running, we are seeing the performance issue with the multiple users coming on to. If there is only one instance, it could serve 12 sessions without an issue, under 10 seconds form saves, but if it is, as soon as we bring up the second instance, we are seeing this issue. I don't know if it is specific to our environment. We are working with Oracle development team. They're just throwing it out there in case if anyone is also running into issue, or it's just my problem. It's a BSO planning application.
Well, when you say instance, are you talking about two servers and a second planning instance that's load balanced? Is that what you mean?
Yes, yes.
Oh, I see, okay.
Yeah, so it's two, it's a clustering, planning 0 and planning 1. in cluster, maybe even horizontal
Talk
or
to these
vertical.
guys.
So we have the same issue.
Yeah, sometimes, sometimes that can happen, and there's some WebLogic settings and things that can happen because there's another round of load balancing, right? Do you have OHS on both servers as well?
It's only one OHS on the WebLogic.
Oh, just one OHS.
Yeah,
Okay.
OHS does it through the .conf file, right? It has entries in there, like planning 0, whatever, a number of instances. It automatically does during the deployment, like when you add the application server. So that's how it is.
Right, so there's a lot of internal load balancing that goes on, right? So even if you get the shared services and workspace on server A, you can get the planning instance on server B. There's a lot of internal load balancing that happens behind the scenes. So just because a load balancer gives you server A doesn't mean your entire experience will stay in server A. So it kind of goes back and forth. So I would trace a little bit about kind of what's happening in there. And also it depends on what you're experiencing in planning. Is it just a look and feel, or is it web forms, or is it you're pushing stuff back to Essbase? Or
It's a web form. When you don't have the business rules attached to it, it seems to be running fine. As soon as you bring in the business rules attached to a form save, that's when we have seen this more. We tested several different ways. This is the this is how, and also I think with the defrag and frag of the Essbase side, also factoring in how it is behaving. The behavior is changing based on that too.
That definitely sounds like a challenging one because, there's a mix of load balancing and differences in the Essbase application itself, so I'm not sure that's going to require some real digging.
I have a question regarding, again, EPM application versus the classic planning. So we have recently upgraded from classic to EPMA, as earlier it was EPMA will be the roadmap. So I'm wondering now, will be a wise decision to go back again, converting it to a classic planning application?
My first question would be, why would you ever do EPMA classic to EPMA? That's the only thing that I have to add, because I would never do classic to EPMA. Any point of day, I would never do that. But will it be a wild decision? I don't think,
I
because
said it's a wise decision.
Oh, wise decision. Okay.
Yeah.
It would be a wise decision, because if you look at ASO plan type, because that's something which is catching up with everyone, because you can do smart push. When it comes to on-prem, it's not there now. So you don't have to do any aggregation, or you don't have to worry about the data movement. You don't have to write any batch scripts or anything to do move the data from your plan to a reporting application. So people are really using ASO plan type. So if you are trying to utilize the new features, then yes, it is a wise decision. But if you are not planning to do anything on the ASO plan type or any new features, then you don't have to really worry about it, because EPMA, whatever you have already, that's still supported, it's still there. You will get the bug fixes and everything. Nothing new is going to come there. So you don't have to really go to classic from EPMA if you're not planning to use the new features. If you are, then yes.
Okay, so we got a couple minutes left. I got one question here on the web chat, and then Mike will wrap it up. So let's try to answer this one as quickly as we can. This is an Essbase question. What is the best way to sync data between BSO and ASO? And would it be partitions, or doing export-import using active-passive cube approach, or any other approach?
Is there an all of the above?
What's that?
Is there an all of the above?
All of the above, yeah. What's your preferred method?
I would still do the export and import. That's a faster that I've seen. Then with the, I would still hesitate away from the partitioning. I had bad experiences, my personal experience. It could work well on a different client. I wouldn't do a partitioning. You could still do the export and import, still works. There's no issues there. One option that you can look at is Calc Manager CDF functions, which do that on the fly. There is a Calc Manager MDX copy. You can do that on the fly. I have done it on real-time data transfer. That works fine. You could have, I know Mike has done something on the data export and then have a trigger file which triggers the data transfer. So data export, the CDF functions, I would consider, there is Tony's telling that you should use FDME.
It's an option. I mean, FDME is an option. You're not going to get the best performance, but one of the things that we've also done with partitions to make those more manageable is to leverage DRM and use DRM to generate those partitions because they can become very unwieldy. But if you have that in the mix, then that's another valid option for you.
If you are going the route of push and import and what have you, you just have to remember that you have to do a partial clear on the target because you can't push a nothing. Well, you can, but your transfer files would wind up being huge because you'd be sending a whole lot of pound missings, and it's free. I mean, it's really not that complicated to do. I have a question about, you know, we've seen HAL vignette to DIM adapters in Power Center to, I don't know what, EPMA and ODI was in there, and there's about a 4-year shelf life, it seems, on our data integration tool set. Does the cloud fix that? Does Oracle eating their own dog food slow that down? Or is there anything that we can do to influence them to stop the madness?
So Oracle's been pretty clear on this one, and I know they've been pretty clear on Vignette, and they've been pretty clear on every other technology, but where I've seen this over the past 5 or so years is they are heavily invested in FDMEE. They're enabling metadata to be able to flow through there into DRM, to be able to integrate with DRM to pull mappings. Their stated direction right now is, even with the cloud offering, they want DRM on-premise. It removes a lot of the security problems that they face by putting an ETL solution in the web. That's why when you look at data management in VBCS, you have no scripting. It's because of, with Jython, I could interact with the operating system and destroy an entire pod. You know, if I wanted to or just didn't know what I was doing. I do think that FDME is here to stay. Is it a 30-year solution? No. I think it'll continue to iterate, though, and get more powerful over the next 5 to 10 years.
Okay, folks, we are done. So I want to thank the panel for all of their input and expertise. Please remember to fill out I don't know if, do we have evaluations for this one? Well, if not for this one, for all your other sessions, fill out your evaluations. Enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you. We like having